All right, this is awesome. This is Jeff with the Hodl Review. We are live right here on the chain, and we have some great things to talk about this morning. And at the top of the list, we're going to be discussing an exchange that claims to be completely hack proof. So, with that, I don't even know really exactly where to go with that because as we know, and really putting a bold statement out like that, and maybe as we dig into the technology a little bit today, we'll see that there's really the purpose of them, and maybe their technology is the best, and maybe they truly are hack proof, and that's what we really want to that's what we want to identify. That's what we want to talk about. So. We'll wait and get some people bouncing into the room here. We should be streaming right now on Twitter. We should be going out on Periscope. We should be streaming on multiple platforms. Now, normally I'm streaming at 8 a.m., but I've been pushing it back a little bit to take over this 8:30 spot. And I believe that it's a little bit more accommodating for most people to start out at 8:30. So we're going to try that out, see how that goes. I don't have a countdown timer. I believe next week we'll start out with a nice countdown timer. So that way we have a little bit of anticipation and a little bit of a buildup of momentum to get people logging into the stream. So while we're waiting some frames, so hopefully that doesn't continue, but let's go ahead and just play the intro. All right. And we are back. We're live right here on the Hodl Review. Today we're going to dig into a hack proof exchange. And the one thing that XRP, so no XRP present on this hack proof exchange. Let's see who we got bouncing in here. We got Matt LaRoche and we've got Steve and Chip logging in. Little by little, people start bouncing in. So while you guys do that, I am going to pour a little bit of espresso. So gotta go with the good stuff. Start the morning out right. Been up for, I don't know what time is it, for about 3 hours already. Already walked the dog in the pouring rain and got the workout in, got everything going on, and so here we go. Look at that. Thank you, YouTube, for not getting the count right, but I'm out about midnight over where Matt LaRoche is. So, all right, who else we have here? David D bouncing in. I got my phone down here with the chat, so we can play that correctly. We've got David D bouncing in. David is, let's see who else. So Citizen XRP. Good morning to all. So awesome. Let's just jump into this. Let's get into some of the things we're going to talk about. Before we do that, actually, let me bring up. I want to talk a little bit more about Bermuda because I do plan on having another follow up on Bermuda, but it's great because the premier, essentially the president of Bermuda, liked and retweeted our tweet and our content that we put out yesterday morning regarding Bermuda's adoption of digital asset and creating what's probably going to be the world's greatest sandbox ever. And they're starting out with a stable coin, but man, kudos to the team over there. Kudos to the president of the premier of Bermuda for what he's doing. Man, I'm just really excited to see how that takes off. So, hey, Mr. BXRP, good morning. Good to see you on. So, all right, let us do this. Let me get things set up here, and then we're gonna jump into it. I think I was gonna kind of go a little bit backwards, and hit a few other things first. But I want to go into and look at what Nash is all about. Let me make sure I've got everything lined up here because there's a lot of things to talk about it. I mean, it's pretty amazing. All the activity, all the real world utility of things that have been going on. And then we've got some third. We're going to talk about, are all digital assets trackable and traceable? And so we definitely want to get into a lot of these great things, and we're going to cover all of that today. So top of the list, we're going to talk about third-party audit, and we brought this up many times before when it comes to some of the exchanges that are out there that are not utilizing third-party audit. And so that's really important. We want to look at the transactions, cryptocurrency transactions that are currently being tracked right now. So we're going to get into that. And that's interesting from an AML perspective. What are organizations doing that are actually tracking all digital asset transactions? So we want to get into that. And of course, we also want to talk about this crypto exchange, this digital asset exchange that's claiming to be completely hack proof, with one noticeable exception for a digital asset. So let us start right here. Okay, let me make a quick transition, and we'll kind of go through some of these key points here. Here we go. All right, so this is really cool. I want to start with some positive news, something exciting, something interesting. And I pulled this up. This was on Cointelegraph. UK-based digital exchange to use R3's Corda for post-trade processes. Now, this is a digital exchange, a stock exchange, and it's called RCAX, or it's a London-based digital securities exchange. So we're not talking about digital assets, we're talking about digital securities. And here they're going to be utilizing R3's Corda technology. And so, it's interesting because they're going to incorporate that into the ecosystem. And Chip is shooting me some messages on the side and said, "Hey, what happened to the intro?" Now, I played the intro. So I started out. This is one of the reasons why, as soon as I start out, I mentioned we probably need to set up a timer, do maybe a 2-3 minute timer to let people bounce into the room. But I actually played the intro right away. So, yeah. So anyhow, let's see. Joel Gonzalez, securities over Corda, over XRP is juicy. Yes, there's a lot going on. So, but look, what's interesting about this, and we're looking at the Corda technology, R3 Corda. We also know that within their technology, they're utilizing the digital asset XRP, which is even a little bit more exciting to understand and know that many of these financial institutions out there are beginning to adopt and adapt to the blockchain, to the digital asset technology that's out there, or utilizing the digital asset like an XRP for transaction, for settlement. Now, this is also something to be acknowledged. So here we have in this article, they talk about the UK. Then what they're also identifying here is that a Russia-based bank, Alpha Bank, announced that it's launching a foreign trade finance pilot transaction with cooperation of, what is that, Novolapek Steel Company, whatever, Commerzbank. So, and they're also using Corda. Now, Bank of America joined the Marco Polo network in September. They announced that. So there's a lot of movement. It's not all just about RippleNet, but we're seeing all of these other entities that are coming into play, and it's happening at a more rapid pace right now. The other thing that we noticed that was just announced is that Fidelity, and let me just put up Nash for right now, but Fidelity also announced that it's rolling out. It's done with its trial test period with a handful of traders. And in those traders, they actually had some bigger institutions, but Fidelity will be rolling out with full custody and digital asset access for for trade right now. So I believe that they're really going to be one of the first that are, taking this big, bold initiative and moving out of the test phase. So let's see. David D. Let's see. I kicked it off at 8:30. Anyhow, we can get into this afterwards. But David D. Okay, let's see what you got here. Binance US made it official with their FDIC insurance. That's huge. I don't know how I missed that news, but that's massive news right there. And that's one of the things that we've identified. One of the things that we've talked about, having FDIC insurance. Now, FDIC insurance coverage. Let me bounce out of here. Hang on a second. This is just a little bit more accommodating. Before we get into Nash, I think this is really important, so I'm glad you brought that up. And really the significance of the FDIC insurance. Now, FDIC insurance only covers and protects fiat that's held on their exchange. It's not going to help to cover or insure digital assets, just like with a stock exchange. If you hold in a banking environment, they're going to cover you typically up to $250,000. In a stock exchange environment, they're also going to carry the FDIC, where any of your cash is going to be covered if anything ever happened. However, they're not going to insure your stock. But that being said, in this environment with digital asset, many of the exchanges like a Coinbase or Gemini or others are carrying insurance as well. They're carrying a third-party insurance. Binance, and we'll have to look, it'll be interesting to see, but Binance Global is self-insured. Now, they're supposed to be putting X amount of transaction into an account that's covering their self-insurance. And we need to identify from that perspective whether or not there's a third-party audit that's taking place to monitor the amount of money that they're putting into this self-insured bucket. But that's really big news for David, for Binance to acknowledge that. Exchanges claiming to be FDIC for crypto is misleading at best. FDIC does not insure crypto. Exactly. Do your own. I like that. That's a great statement. And basically, it's what we just covered. So, all right, let me fade back into here and let's bounce back. Okay, so this is one of the first things that we want to get into. This is Nash. Now, Nash.io, an exchange that's claiming to be hack-proof. That's how they kind of acknowledge that. Now, it's interesting too, because if we look at some of the products that they have, their fund management, we'll just kind of do a quick overview here. I don't want to get in and do a full review, just to highlight a group that's claiming to somehow be hack-proof. But here they're combining the security benefits of blockchain with the speed and functionality of traditional financial services. Our non-custodial exchange is lightning fast thanks to our innovative matching engine. Innovative interface. By popular demand, currencies with Nash. So it's going to be interesting when we look at what currencies they do trade, what pairs they have, and they have the mobile, their extension, Nash Pay. Make life easy for your customers. Embed our platform into your store for instant digital asset payments with zero fees or cash back. That's kind of a nice addition. You'll notice again that XRP is absent from this, and you'll see the basket of crypto product that they are adding to their platform. I think there's some interesting aspects to this exchange, and really when we get into it, one of the aspects that I really want to dig into, and it's just coming soon. We need to get more information on this, and I kind of like where they're going with this, which is Nash Pay. And right now, there's really not many, decent solutions to allow a customer to come in and pay with any digital asset. And then we'll see. Here it says, automatic conversion. Want Bitcoin, but your customer has Ethereum, no problem. Our exchange handles automatic currency conversion. You can also settle to national currencies via our partners. So it'll be interesting to see who their partners end up being and see how this rolls out when it does come soon. Simple to manage, quick to set up. And the key here, is that it's zero fees or cash backs. So that's kind of nice. It's just interesting. These exchanges are popping up. all over the place. This is my first become a currency partner. But this is really my first interaction with Nash. I haven't really seen them before. So when I stumbled on them, I said, you know what, it's kind of interesting. What I want to look at though, I meant to look this up before I started this whole conversation, is to really get an idea of where these guys are based out of. And you know what? Let me see. Let's see where they're located. I believe it's a U.S. based exchange. Originally known as Neon Exchange. Okay, Nash was founded in 2017 by 5 open source blockchain developers on 3 different continents. There you go. There goes that. So they do have some global presence based on what they're stating here. We'll need to get in and dig into this a little more at another time. But just again, as a note, I think it's interesting to see this. So, all right, the next thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit has to be with until it's hacked, Chip. Yeah, exactly. So that's where it's going to be interesting to see when, and every website, every exchange, everybody's susceptible. So we'll have to dig a little more into their technology to find out why they're making this hack-proof claim. But anyhow, CipherTrace. I think I might have brought this up and talked about this before. I think this is interesting. CipherTrace has really taken things to another level, because when you look at AML and you look at the concern out there that digital asset is being transacted and utilized for nefarious purpose, for terrorist purpose, and obviously many other things. So it's important to have some form of a digital asset law enforcement. Here, we're looking at how is CipherTrace actually detecting money laundering? How is law enforcement globally utilizing it? What kind of regulatory supervision? How are they monitoring risk? All these kind of bullet statements here. And it's interesting because, one of the things that, was of utmost concern when Token Taxonomy Act was put in front of the Financial Services Committee, and really you hear this coming up every time they talk about digital asset within Congress in any shape or form, but is digital asset AML compliant? One of the misleading concepts is that all digital asset are being utilized for nefarious purpose. All digital asset is automatically used for supporting terrorist organizations. And so here you have an organization that is tracking basically every transaction, or the majority of transactions, other than the privacy coin tokens or coins, whatever. And so they're identifying movement of funding. Now, months and months ago, there was an article that came out. There's a similar organization to this that was operating out of Israel that was tracking movement of funds for some key terrorist organizations, and they were actually able to trace Bitcoin funds that had been raised via Coinbase, that moved through a Coinbase wallet, that was being funneled over to terrorist organizations in the Middle East. And so it's amazing, and you could look at this from different perspective and say, hey, is this an infringement of your rights? If they're monitoring every single transaction. We know credit card transactions, banking transactions, most financial institution transactions are being traced and tracked in some way, shape, or form. Now, as you're moving fiat currency, and really one of the biggest mechanisms of the support of the criminal entities, they're moving fiat. And so as they try to move into a digital asset, it's interesting because, as we all know, they're all traceable. Obviously, if you don't know where the wallet is or who owns that wallet, you don't know who it belongs to. These organizations are compiling all that data, and so they are, able to get a better gauge of where the money is flowing to, who it's coming from, and they're observing. Obviously, there could be some military intelligence involved at a different level, but this organization really focused in on this. Financial investigations for researchers and law enforcement. I just think this is interesting. Powerful blockchain forensic tools enables investigation of criminal activity, fraud, and sanction evasion. Visually trace the movement of money through dark markets of the crypto economy. So this is important. Now, one of the things that has been highlighted, overall, and there was an article that came out recently that ATMs in the United States are the next big target right now for criminal activity, and so the scams that are being perpetrated, being able to put some sort of I don't know what they're using to do it, but they're able to get money out of these ATMs, and so as we're starting to see this type of criminal activity ramp up, and as more and more transactions are going to take place in this digital asset realm, and just as we are just talking about with Nash and having the exchanges and movement of all these digital assets, it's so critical to also then be able to have some sense of security that if there is some form of a scam taking place, that there's also potentially a mechanism to get your money back. That's when you start hitting Main Street utility, is kind of at a point where there's a feeling of where you're not 100% self-reliant, where there's some method or some form of protection over these transactions. So right now, if you think about it from an early adopter perspective, are we concerned? We're more concerned about being self-reliant and protecting our own digital asset. We're not utilizing a Nash and keeping all of our digital asset on the exchange. Maybe there's a mix where you have some digital asset on multiple exchanges plus offline. Keeping it in a in cold storage, or taking it off and putting it into a ledger, or whatever, utilizing a ledger or whatever it might be. So once we hit Main Street with mainstream adoption, they're not going to want to do that. They're going to want to get into and log into their Nash account. They're going to want to log into their Fidelity account. They're going to want to log into their Coinbase account, and that's it. They're not going to want to have to worry about where it moves to. At the same point, if they're going to be spending, they also want to know that there's some form of protection out there that's protecting them from scams and threats. Banks and financial institutions also need to know that there's a mechanism in place to monitor for potential threat and to protect them as well. Again, as we talked about in the beginning, the potential for hacks and scams and all of that, these from a criminal activity perspective, they're going to continuously ramp up. They're not going to ramp down their efforts. So we also know that it's really important from a regulatory perspective to make sure that that entities and whether it's a digital asset or the blockchain technology, what are AML compliant. And so part of that AML compliance, having third-party mechanism in place to even audit that third-party compliance, to almost guarantee third-party AML compliance, also allows for more, I would say again, Main Street adoption. So I think in my opinion, I believe that all of these components are important when we start to move towards full regulatory clarity, and we begin to move into Main Street. So all right, let's look at this next one here. Let's look at Luca. Now, Luca is a third-party audit solution, making crypto assets accountable. Now, there's multiple different, types of, audit, and I do believe that, as you get into an area of enterprise grade encryption in transit and the rest of enterprise API connectivity data. I mean, we can get into this. What we do, Luca transforms distributed and decentralized data into auditable business information that enterprises use to improve operations, create financial statements, and provide regulatory reporting and transparency. Now, I've brought this up when it goes, when it comes to a number of different exchanges. There are some exchanges that are operating without third-party audit that are also getting into the lending space. Now, if you're going to claim to be a lender, and you're going to allow people to also then, and you're going to pay interest on the holdings of digital asset, then there has to be some transparency of your process. At the same point, if you are going to be self-insured, like some of these exchanges are claiming to be, there needs to be some regulatory reporting and transparency in your process. And so much of this is so valuable and vital. There's other third-party audit providers out there. I just thought this was interesting to pull one up and look at it and talk about it, and really more so just from a perspective of the need to highlight the importance of a third-party audit when we get into institutions and organizations that will now be managing and handling other people's money. And so, without naming, who these exchanges are, then, we don't, there's just so much to it. There's exchanges right now, again, that are claiming to operate in certain jurisdiction without providing true transparency of how they are operating in certain jurisdiction, while others are not operating in those same jurisdiction, and yet the others are staying compliant by not operating in certain jurisdiction. Take Coinfield as an example. They are not operating in the U.S. jurisdiction, and they have statements to back that up, and you won't be able to trade on their exchange from a U.S. jurisdiction. They're rolling out, some interesting product that is going to tokenize securities. We don't know how that's going to look, but it's also not accessible to people in the U.S. Now, there's other entities out there, other exchanges that are operating within the jurisdiction of the U.S. that has not proven as to how they are functioning and operating in this jurisdiction securely and safely, protecting their users' interests, and at the same time also not providing who they're working with from a third-party audit perspective to provide regulatory reporting and transparency. So whether they're using this company Luca or I don't know, there's many others out there. It doesn't matter. It's just the point is that it's really important that they're utilizing one. Here you talk about their crypto office, what Luca's middle and back office platform, transform, distribute, and decentralized data into operational and audit ready. And then here their reference data. Service tracks and normalizes crypto data to create a master repository of crypto asset and exchange information. It's the most accurate and continuously updated crypto security master in the industry. I don't know, we'd have to check that to see if that's true. And then they have different types of pricing and et cetera, et cetera. So I think, it's important. Institutional grade solutions for your post-trade business challenges. So anyhow, that is Luca and third-party audit. Let me just pop over to the chat real quick. I don't mean to ignore everybody, and just see what we've got going on here. So, let's see here. What did we miss? Hang on a second. Okay. What are you talking about? BT not mentioning China was calculating deceptive, as if certainly isn't a positive, and I bet many people don't know. Not that being in China is reason alone to be discredited, but why not reveal? I would agree with that, David. If you're going to cover up your primary location, if that's what you're talking about, if China is their primary address, then by not disclosing certain information is deceptive. By making claims of having offices in locations that aren't really offices is deceptive to a point. uh, mainly because you have to have some concern. It's not just small business. You're talking about a financial institution that is responsible for protecting people's money and people's digital assets. So if you transfer fiat currency to somebody, you transfer a digital asset to somebody on an exchange, you make claims that you're going to pay interest and you're holding digital asset, you make claims to be self-insured, and you don't have a third party audit solution to prove anything that you've said, then you're putting yourself and your users in a very bad spot. At the same time, then then it's just very very critical that everybody operates above board. You also have to start looking and reading in between the lines, and trying to identify what it is that the exchange can and cannot do. And so, as David's mentioning, there's definitely some major issue there. And we went into it before in regards to that exchange, but we could get into a whole long conversation, about certain issues, especially when it comes to identifying whether or not an exchange can trade in the U.S. Now, if you look at Binance pulled out of the United States for a reason, and they launched Binance US for a reason, to stay compliant with U.S. Guidelines and to stay legal in the U.S. jurisdiction. An exchange like Coinfield does not operate in the U.S. jurisdiction because they need to abide by a certain legal framework in order to trade and operate in the United States. So for another exchange to make claims that they can operate in the U.S. market and these other exchanges can't, is definitely cause for concern. Let's just leave it at that. So let me move on here. We're stuck on Luca, and I think this is interesting too. Now, this has to do with any of you guys up in Canada, but Canada, and this was came out. What's today? It's day 19th. So this was on Thursday. This article came out on Cointelegraph. Canada exploring digital currency to track people's spending habits. Now, I don't know how you guys think about that. Now, this is taking things to a slightly different level, because if we really look at this and we go back and we say, okay, where's Cipher? Cipher is looking at transaction from an AML perspective. Canada is looking at implementing digital currency to share info with police and tax authorities to make sure that when you buy a good, you're actually paying taxes on that good, and tracking your spending habit. So that becomes a little bit more invasive, and obviously there could be some possibility and some potential that it's happening, and we already know, like in Amazon, for instance, every time you go to Whole Foods and you use their Whole Foods app to scan something, they're tracking every single product that you purchase. For the first time, I opened up my Amazon app and I actually saw every single product that I've ever bought at Whole Foods in the Amazon app. It tracked everything that I bought. Now, can they use that from a marketing perspective? Can they use that to better stock the shelves at local Whole Foods based on, compiling all of this data of shoppers at a Whole Foods and identifying, how it is, who, buys what, and they have more of something? That's interesting. Tracking your spending habits from a taxation perspective, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, because people are obviously responsible to pay taxes. But here now, they're automatically sharing it, and it becomes a little bit more invasive when the government is monitoring what your spending habits are. I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys can chime in on something like this and see what you guys think, but it's kind of crazy. Let's see here, but look at this. According to the document, one of the benefits of the Canadian Central Bank of launching its own digital asset would be the ability to collect more information on its citizens than is possible when people use cash. There's the statement I was looking for. These personal details wouldn't be shared with the payee, but could be shared with police or tax authorities. So you're the payee, and and you're not going to get that information, but they could share it with the police or tax authorities. It's just so interesting, of what can potentially be done. We look at it initially. You think back and you go back to where what was the initial purpose of Bitcoin, which was to get away from banks, and their concept was more based and wrapped in a concept of anarchy almost, to flee government control. And here you go with digital asset, and it only makes sense that this is kind of the direction things would end up moving in, is that when you have something that's digital, it becomes traceable. Now the government could potentially then utilize all of that information to monitor what the spending habits, and especially when you start getting banks and financial institutions involved, even as we saw the IRS had reached out and requested that Coinbase would turn over all of their customer data of people that had transactions of greater than $10,000 buy or sell. So that's interesting, and so obviously that's going to ramp up more and more as Fidelity and all these other banks and exchanges get actively involved, and there's more utility of the digital asset space. Things change. The entire environment is going to change. So I thought that was interesting. Let me just pop over to the chat again here, because I think this is getting interesting again. And I know you guys are talking about Bittrex. You guys are bringing up the ambassadors. And I definitely threw out some cause of concern still over Bittrex not having a third-party audit, over Bittrex utilizing self-insurance mechanism, Bittrex not providing clear, concise information and being fully transparent of how they are functioning in the U.S. market, when Binance and Coinfield and many others cannot, and they're pretty much selling through, or they're basically, they open themselves up globally throughout the U.S. When we've seen others that that you're limited. You're very limited in utilizing resources. Even for locally based exchanges. You look at even companies like Prosper, Robinhood, even Robinhood that was obviously transacting in stock. They had to do a slow rollout throughout the United States to make sure that they were compliant with every state, because states are a little bit different, as we know, with like New York. Same thing. They pulled back. They pulled out of the states, different states, in order to become compliant in those states again. And so those are things that I find, very troubling and concerning. And you guys are bringing up a lot of other valid points. So, Ferdy, can you please look at the, what is that? Oh, Airy Bittrex stream. They showed you how insured and how it, what does that say? I can't see that. Elms? I don't understand that. Bittrex will gain more credibility when they get licensed in New York, Florida, Texas, etc. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Dan. When they do get licensed in those regions, I think that's going to be important. So it's different, and there's, and that's what the big concern isn't globally. The big concern is for the U.S. market. You have to make sure that you are staying compliant for your users in the United States. And so I think that's really important. And yeah, anyhow, Yeah. So let me see here. Okay. All right. I don't want to get involved in any of the other in-depth conversation, but yeah, I think that that's important. And Ferdy, I will go back and watch that. I have not watched it. Um, they are not allowed to sell in those countries. Which countries are we talking about? States or countries? Um, all right. So anyhow, I'm coming up here on 40 minutes. You guys are engaged in a really in-depth conversation. I think that's great. Yeah, Ferdy. Okay. Yeah, states. Yep. So right now they did pull out of those states because New York, Florida, and Texas are definitely more difficult. And David D, it is uncertain at best whether they're licensed in any state. They just disclose they cannot do business in New York. Yeah. So, hey, Carl, what's up, man? David has some really, really strong points. And so, Ferdy, I'm gonna go back and watch Crypto Eddie's interview with them. I have a lot of concern overall how their program was rolled out, and I think that there needs to be more transparency, for sure, within what they're doing. And I also believe that they not only need to give a better explanation of how they're self-insured, but they do need to disclose which program they're using for custodial service, where they're storing the digital asset, how they're protecting the digital asset. I think they need to be a little more clear on that. And I also want to see which third-party audit they're using to prove that everything they say is true. That's it. I think that's transparency, and I don't think that that's too much to ask of an exchange that's holding people's money to actually provide real transparency via a third-party audit. And you'll see that many of these other providers out there do utilize third-party audit to prove what they're doing, but Bittrex is putting themselves into a box by being self-insured and self-protecting themselves, like Binance doing the same thing. Bittrex almost looks like a clone of Binance, in my opinion, based on the coloring scheme, the way they're doing their business. They're just trying to follow in the footsteps of Binance. And I get it. I'm not going after any of the ambassadors, anything like that. I'm giving just my specific perspective and issue with these with what's going on with Bittrex. And I definitely want to get more information, but I think they need to be more transparent. I think that's what's most important, is transparency across the board. So anyhow, so I'm gonna go. I'll definitely, David. Yeah, I'm gonna go watch that as well. I'm glad Ferdy brought that up. I think it's important. More information that's better. From my perspective, I just want to call it like it is. And if I'm not in favor of any one exchange. So I don't see why everybody is clamoring over one exchange anyways. I mean, at the end of the day, you're buying and selling digital asset. Is it important to see transaction and transition in the space? I think it's important. I think it's important that when we see Fidelity adapting and starting to sell digital asset, that's really what it's all about. It's all about Main Street adoption, and that's what's important. And so when you see Fidelity getting involved, when you see a blending of the banking, the financial institutions, and the digital assets, that's important. When you're gimmicky and trying to, trick people into utilizing your exchange, I have issue with that. I'm not saying they are, but I'm just saying I have issue with that. What's most important from my perspective is understanding how this is going to grow into the space. How is it going to influence the shipping industry? How is it going to influence the healthcare industry? How is it going to influence business in general? How is it going to influence cross-border payments and transaction? How is it going to influence government? How is it going to influence collection of taxation? That's what is important in this space. And squabbling over an exchange. There's multiple exchanges out there. It's not a sports team. There's nothing to be enraged or impassioned about. What we need is full transparency. And if there's people out there that want to invest their money in something without transparency, that's their prerogative. And I've got my prerogative. And my claim is that I want full transparency. So that's it. That's it. Yeah, that hack-proof exchange. And that's the other thing. Why make a claim like that? I don't understand. Why put yourself out there on the spot, claiming to be hack-proof? Just protect yourself like everybody else. Just make sure that you're insured. Just make sure you use a third-party audit. Just make sure that you're doing everything right. Just make sure that you're not Quadriga RX or QX or whatever they are, and have one guy holding all of the digital asset on a ledger, and then when he dies, you can't gain access to it. Just make sure that you're doing right by your customer, and that's all there is to it. So, anyhow, so so that's it. And some of the points that I'm seeing, they get brought up, like Citizen XRP just brought up, an exchange that goes the extra mile for them from a customer support perspective. If they go the extra mile to help you recover some lost XRP, and they help you, and there's someone on the other end of the phone or email, and they're responsive, and meaningful, and that can also be very representative of what their philosophies are and their mindset is. So if you have that great customer support, just back it up with a little bit of transparency. I think is important. So, all right. I think that's all I got for today. So, so we had good conversation. I'm gonna wrap it up. It is 9:20 over here. That stream went on 20 minutes longer than I anticipated. Wanted to keep it to 30 minutes. We're at the 50-minute mark. Glad you guys took the time out of your day to join us here with a HODL review on the chain. Go check out onthechain.io. Onthechain.io. Go check out. You could fill out, if you scroll to the bottom, plug in your email there. We'll be sending out updates as we progress, as we develop on thechain.io. There's a lot of great things that are going to be happening. Some amazing interviews that are being scheduled. One we're doing on Monday. We'll be rolling that one out, premiering it after. And then we have like 5 or 6 big interviews with some big blockchain companies that are coming up over the next month or so. So we're getting all those booked, all those scheduled. We're excited about it. Also, stay tuned because we're going to be rolling out podcasts. There's so much that's going on with On The Chain. So onthechain.io. We have 2 YouTube channels, On The Chain Live and On The Chain. We're also streaming right now on Periscope. We're also on Cinnamon. We're on Coil. We're utilizing all the different aspects as much as we can of blockchain technology for On The Chain. So that's it. This is Jeff here with the HODL review, and I'll check you guys out next time.